We are in Psalm 135.
It's actually just 35.
I'm sorry, 35. We were just talking about a psalm in the 100s, and thanks for correcting me. Psalm 35, join us there. We read yesterday verses 1 through 8, and we're going to talk right now about verses 7 and 8. And we laid the foundation last week that this is a prayer of David, most likely when he's running from Saul. What he has in his corner is the promises of God. God has promised to protect and preserve and establish David's throne.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, in the big picture, David knows.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important as we study what we call imprecatory Psalms, where David's praying this vengeful vengeance, this wrath coming upon his enemies. We set up last week that his first prayer was plead my cause. God, convince my enemies. But now what David is really praying is that God would win against those that are unrepentant. And so, Morris, I want you to share some thoughts with us on verses 7 and 8. For without cause, David's describing to God. I said last week, we get to drop in on David's devotional life.
Right.
When David experienced injustice, what did he do? He went to God, and he complained to God about it, and he laid it out to God. And I think that's such a powerful practice. For without cause, they have hid from me their net in a pit, which without cause they have digged for my soul. So David's not saying he's perfect, but he's saying in regard to this situation, he's innocent.
Sure.
And then he says, let destruction come upon him, this enemy, at unawares. God catch him by surprise. Let his net, let the trap that he's hid for me, let him be caught in it.
Well, Pastor Cary, a couple of things come to my mind very quickly is that in verse 7, he mentions, he makes a statement for without cause. Without cause. He mentions it twice. It's as if he's underscoring the fact that they're attacking me and there's really no reason for this. I am under attack. And it's like he's saying, God, I've got to really underscore this and highlight it. I'm not perfect, as you just clearly put it, but these attackers are coming after me, hiding their net in the pit. Now, I would assume your listeners are thinking, well, no one's digging a hole for me and got a pit for me, but there are attacks at all of us. We all have enemies. Sometimes the enemy, I think, is within our own emotions get the best of us many times, and they cause us to go down trails of thought that are not beneficial, that are not biblical in thought, and in a real sense, the application can be made. Lord, this enemy that I'm fighting all the time, my flesh, my unredeemed flesh, and Satan is always laying traps for me to get me to fall. And Lord, let me see your attack on them. Secondly, I think about where in the New Testament where the Lord said, vengeance, Paul referenced, vengeance is the Lord's. He will repay. I'm sure you've already spent time in Psalm 23 in your study of the Psalms. Psalm 23, the Mount Everest of the Psalms here. You could spend forever trying to go through it. In the middle of that beautiful Psalm, Psalm 23, David says, you've set a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. He was saying, you vindicated me in front of these people who've gone after me. You've shown them that your favor is upon me. I think here in verses 7 and 8, David is saying the same thing. The psalmist is simply saying, Lord, do it again. Do again. Vindicate me in the presence of my enemies, because, as you said, I'm not perfect, but Lord, there's no reason, this cause of their attack on me. Sometimes this could be an actual person in our lives today. And then sometimes, as I said, it can just be our own enemies on the inside of us that attack us. And it's okay to pray and say, God, make it stop. Make these attacks be over with, and let them fall in their own entrapments.
And the timing is in God's hands.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the things I'm taking away here, and I'm hearing even as you're sharing, David is essentially declaring that this is in God's hands. By default, he's saying, God, you exact vengeance. I won't.
Yeah.
I'm not going to try to. I'm not going to pursue the resolution of this. You have to do this. In some sense, it's because David felt probably insufficient as a victim,
Sure.
as a weak, runner. But I think in a bigger and wiser sense, David is refusing to get drawn into the drama,
That's good.
the emotion of the injustice. And the reason I say that is there's two things that come to my mind. The first is lots of our listeners have, at some point in their lives, all of us have become the recipients of some form of injustice. Somebody's lied against us.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Somebody's. We live in a dog-eat-dog, backstabbing world.
Yeah.
Some viewer at work today is going to experience this kind of situation.
Good point.
They're going to be immediately tempted to be drawn into the emotion
Good point.
and to take matters into their own hands. And I think the psalm is challenging us. No, put it in God's hands. Let God be your vindicator. But this is even bigger and more beautiful to me, and that is. We live in a world that sees the injustice all around. I mean, justice is a big theme today.
Oh, big time.
It's in the mainstream narrative.
Big time.
Injustice, and by the way, the modern narrative is that the enemy is you and me, like middle-aged white guys.
Yeah.
Just by virtue of our birth.
Yeah.
And our existence on planet Earth, we are the oppressors, right?
Sure.
But the fact is. Even as Christians, we're oppressed. We receive slander and injustice. So the modern narrative is there's injustice. We are surrounded by injustice, but the world has no way of resolving it. Everybody's boiling up about injustice, but nobody has a solution. And David did. And David pointed us to the solution.
He sure did.
Because God is the solution. God is the vindicator. He's the executor of justice. And that's what the gospel is all about. Jesus came to bear our justice. Right. He will come one day executing justice. But in the first position, he came to absorb the justice I deserve. Now that's mind-blowing.
That is mind-blowing.
Okay, because in a day when the average viewer or listener might be thinking, how do I get justice on my side? I say this at church a lot. Everybody wants justice on everybody else, but nobody wants to face their own justice, like the justice we deserve. But Jesus faced it for us.
Wow.
So my challenge from this is don't get drawn into the trap of the drama.
Good point.
Of the injustice.
Pass it back off to the Lord. Say, Lord, He's in your hands. These enemies are in your hands. It's beyond me. I don't have the ability to solve it. God, you take care of these problems. And that's a great way to live. Not to
It's
try
free.
to take
It's liberating.
It's liberating.
You can live your life. You're not all caught up in the drama.
Right. And it's unnatural. And I use that word on purpose because in our natural flesh, we want to take revenge. Just like the old games we played as a kids, that hit last game. You hit me, I hit you back, you hit me, back and forth. It's great just to say, he hit me. Lord, take care of him.
Game over.
Game over.
And you're free to live.
That's a great way to live.
Well, tomorrow I want to ask you, have you ever been the recipient? You don't have to go into details, but be thinking about, have you ever been the recipient of injustice in your life? And if so, how did you respond? How did God intervene? How did it get resolved? If it has, how did it get resolved? At least for you to be able to move forward. So with that, my friends, I'm going to cue this conclusion, and I want to thank you. Thank you, Morris, for being our guest today. Hey, whatever drama you're getting drawn into, don't step in that net. It is a trap itself.
Right.
Trust that God not only bore your justice, but He's going to one day execute final justice. Until then, plead for your enemies. Plead for justice. Plead for the gospel. Hey, happy Tuesday. We'll see you tomorrow.